divisive thing that's happening in the Senate, which is about the new formula on how to share county revenue. So we'll want to just listen to a bit of that debate that was going on. I think we had people like Senator Wetangula, Kithure Kindiki, and so on, just giving their contribution so that we can set this up before we talk about it. Yep.
This is a house of equity. It's a house of equality. Equality of the vote. Lamu carries 1 vote, Nairobi carries 1 vote. And equity because we must slash a level that makes every single corner of this country comfortable in the process of allocating money.
The same sword that will be used to deny any county even a shilling of what it got last year can be the sword that will be used someday in future by a national government that hates devolution to slash money from each and every county.
I beg to plead with the House that we give ourselves more time to look at these new simulations by the 3 distinguished senators and also to build consensus.
I think this is a good time for us to continue the engagement, and so that maybe, God willing, maybe in the next 2 or 3 days or even 1 week, we can come up with a proposal which is agreeable to each and every senator.
I want to start with you here. I said this is confusing because first we have seen that it doesn't follow the pattern that we have seen lately in the Senate, where it was quite clear where everybody will be voting. This one was all mixed up, which means the stakes are very different here. But secondly, because it is difficult to understand what the quarrel is about. So maybe you can just set for us very quickly, what is this quarrel about, what is called the 3rd generation revenue sharing formula?
The quarrel is simple. It's about how to share resources between the different county governments, the 47 of them actually. And remember, we are moving now from a 2nd generation formula of revenue sharing to a 3rd generation revenue that was proposed by the Commission on Revenue Allocation, CRA. And remember, the Senate has an input in this, but also remember, the Senate is the protector of devolution, so to say. Each of the senators will want some more money for their respective counties. And there's no senator whatsoever who would agree to have his or her county get a reduced share of the national resources that are being devolved to the county governments. And looking at the formula that was proposed by the CRA, there are some counties, 28 of them, that are likely to gain some more resources. And in equal measure, 19 counties are definitely going to lose some money. And the graphics that you see there, those are some of the gaining counties, including Kajiado, Nakuru, and so on and so forth, Kirinyaga, Baringo, Bomet, West Pokot. But the biggest gainer would be Kiambu County, that would get about 1.3 billion shillings, Nairobi 1.2 billion shillings, Uasin Gishu 923 million shillings, Nandi County 788 million shillings, Kajiado 765, Nakuru 744, Laikipia 660, Trans Nzoia 626. Those are some of the specifics. And in terms of the counties that would lose greatly, include Mandera, that would lose about 2 billion, Wajir about 1.4 billion, Kwale 1.2 billion, Kilifi 1.1 billion, Marsabit 984, Narok 853, Mombasa 682, Makueni 574, Nyamira 560, Tana River 499, an equal amount of money 499 for Tharaka Nithi County, and Garissa 484 million. This is basically a question of which are the parameters that should get more weight in terms of revenue allocation. And the bone of contention is 1, population, and number 2, landmass. I remember there was this discussion about the number of people getting a bigger share of the resources as opposed to landmass. And on the other hand, there are people who are arguing that for the counties that are very huge, it will take more resources to move or to service one person from one corner of the county to another corner of the county. And eventually, the Senate will have to agree on the best formula, because county governments will not be able to properly make their budgets, because the formula for revenue sharing informs the amount of money that each county is going to get in that county allocation of revenue act that is supposed to be signed by the president. So it will be difficult for county governments as at now to properly make budgets because they don't exactly know how much money they're going to receive. So eventually, senators will have to find a way. And there are political issues here because remember, we have a formula in our election that says for you to be declared the winning presidential candidate, you must get at least 25% of the votes cast in at least 24 counties. So any presidential candidate looking for votes in the 2022 polls will be very careful about a debate that will end up reducing the amount of money that goes to county A or goes to county B. Okay. In equal measure, another county will want some more resources. So it's a political question. And look at the counties that are losing vis-a-vis the counties that are gaining. And therein you see both an economic issue as well as a political issue.
And Linus, that's where I want to come in. A political issue without a doubt. But why would we see a formula that seems to benefit, or rather which is skewed towards particular counties getting the support? We've seen, for example, senators from the Mount Kenya region specifically are very enthusiastic about this. What does that tell you? How do you account for that, considering that quite a number of people, including Handshake, Tanga, all of these guys, seem to be opposed to this new formula?
Well, Joe, it tells me this is a product of short memory. Very, very short memory indeed. I don't even consider it a political question. It's more of a common sense and constitutional issue as well. Because you look at the spirit of the 2010 Constitution, it went for equalization. It went for addressing historical injustices, trying to bring counties and areas of the country that were behind to the table as well in terms of development. And suddenly you see this excitement towards a new mantra called 1 man, 1 shilling, instead of 1 man, 1 vote. You know, it's heavily political, very, very heavily political, but very selfish in a way, because what it means is the country will stay the way the colonial authorities left it, meaning the areas that are populated and have agricultural potential will always get the bulk of the allocation of national resources. And the areas that are sparsely populated like Wajir, like Mandera, Turkana, Narok, now that it's also part of the list, will be losing money. I think the fact that this has failed means there's still some reason in the background of all these conversations. Because the excitement to suddenly turn resources and take them away to from other regions to this so-called 1 man, 1 shilling is actually wrong. It goes against the spirit of the Constitution and also beats logic, because historically, the areas that are now demanding for more already got a lot. In those areas, you will talk about the best roads, the best schools, many hospitals, in comparison to the regions that are going to complain, like Turkana, like Northeastern, like the coast region. So what it has done, and this is very interesting because I see it playing out and even informing future political conversations, including BBI, because there's some substance that is supposed to go into the BBI that includes talk of proportional representation in terms of creation of more parliamentary seats and all that. This incident, very brief as it was, Francis, within the Senate, actually muddies the water, especially for BBI, because now it raises the alarm as to what is the intention of changing the Constitution.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember the discussions around the various rallies that we attended, the so-called BBI mobilization and sensitization rallies. There was this talk of every region that you went to, number one on the recommendations was an increase in the amount of funds or in terms of the allocation to county governments. And the question of more resources to county government is no longer a question of debate. It's a serious question, and as a result of what we've seen happening in devolution, many more people now believe that it is possible to have a serious development in their respective areas as a result of devolution. And any situation that would be seen as averse to devolution or as opposed to devolution will obviously be rejected. But also, there's the question of equality and equity. Equity is largely need-based. What are the needs of specific areas so that even as the resources are allocated, they are allocated on need basis? And number two, I think also it's important to now gradually move the discussion from sharing the national cake to baking a bigger cake so that everybody is accommodated. Because if you listen to those from the Mount Kenya region, for example, they say 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote. They argue that they contribute substantially to the national kitty, and so they expect an equally big return in terms of what they get from their allocation. But on the other hand, there are regions that are for years been marginalized, and so they are saying facilitators to catch up with those who are advantaged before us. So it's a serious discussion that the Senate must look at candidly, and kicking the can down the road will not help, because listening to the Senate sitting last time, you could see that no one clearly wants to bail the cat. But eventually, senators will have to bite the bullet and maybe annoy some and please some, but hopefully there will be a win-win scenario in terms of how the resources will be allocated.
But interesting, Francis, that this thing seemed to have defied the kind of solidarity we have seen in the Senate, especially on the side of those who support the president and those who support former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. I mean, we've seen that completely unravel right in front of our eyes, where that there was no clear pattern to how that vote, that debate was going on. When you listen to people like Murkomen, you listen to people like Kindiki, and then you come and listen to someone like Orengo, no less, saying, wait, let's adjourn, let's look at this thing a bit more keenly. I mean, we didn't see the excitement that we saw, for example, with the impeachment motions that we've seen, or the purge on the committees that we saw, where that divide was very clear, which might suggest that there's something else that is going on, that the handshake is not the solution to all problems, that there are actually problems that will now force the two gentlemen who lead the handshake to actually sit down and negotiate on certain things. I mean, there are people, for example, who say that there's a conversation going on the handshake side about BBI, which provided for 35% of the national revenues going to the counties, which some of them are arguing, like, wait, let's wait for this one then. Maybe let's do this for a year with the second generation formula as we negotiate. And then once BBI comes, they're saying, with 35%, then maybe everybody will get more than what they're getting now and probably be happier. But obviously something that has exposed some few things about the handshake. What is it really resting on, and what the future of BBI might or might not be?
Actually, the bigger challenge, Joe, is if there were more resources to be shared, even though a formula would have been agreed on, it would have meant that at least each county would have retained what it currently gets or a little more. But now, when you're talking about a similar amount of money in the last financial year and this financial year, and then you apply a formula that will result in less money to County A and more money to County B, obviously there will be a point of departure.
And a lot of the counties obviously have done their budgets based on the expectation that they were going to get at least as much as what they got the last time around, isn't it?
Absolutely. In fact, the governor of Mandera, Ali Roba, would have a problem accepting a scenario where 2.2 billion shillings will be taken away from him. But I also believe my governor, James Nyoro, would be very happy to get an extra 1.4 billion shillings, as a result of this financial year. So it's a discussion that needs a lot of sobriety. It's a discussion that requires a lot of give and take. But if, for example, there was a bigger allocation to county governments, let's say 600 billion shillings or thereabout, we would be discussing a formula that would, as it were, result in an increase in all the counties. But now we're talking about 316 billion shillings in the last financial year and 316 billion shillings in this financial year. And not just that, Joe, also remember, this formula will be applied in the next 3, 4, 5 years. So it's a discussion that is not just for this financial year, but for 4, 5 financial years to come. So definitely it's a discussion that requires a lot of input, a lot of thought process. And when you talk about the handshake, the two main players here control a substantial amount of political power in this country. So obviously they have an image to protect. They wouldn't want to be seen to have, quote unquote, betrayed their political strongholds by either accepting to have the amount of money allocated to these counties reduced. Obviously, they would want a situation where there's a win-win scenario. And I would believe and think that the reason why the Senate even could not go past where it did on this matter is to give them an opportunity to consult further, particularly with the two handshake players, so that ultimately there is a solution. But hopefully that solution will come quickly, because there is likely to be some sort of a crisis financially in the counties if this matter drags on.
Linus, I mean, to put it plainly, this formula basically advantages, so to speak, the strongholds of President Uhuru Kenyatta. I mean, he's been struggling to kind of fix his backyard. There's been quite some resentment, some people say rebellion going on in his backyard. And this is something that, people like his MP, Moses Kuria, have been talking about, this whole thing of 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote, that sort of thing. And yet it actually goes counter to the interest of many counties that are seen to be the strongholds of Raila Odinga. For example, we've seen counties at the coast. We've seen, for example, a county like Nyamira or Vihiga that actually voted overwhelmingly for him. So it puts the two gentlemen in a very interesting position, doesn't it?
It does, and the irony of this whole arrangement is actually not just the strongholds, but the backyards of President Uhuru Kenyatta, former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, and Deputy President William Ruto are actually benefiting if this formula were to be sustained. But look at how the debate played out in the House. The opposition to the arrangement came primarily from former Prime Minister Raila Odinga's region and Deputy President William Ruto's region as well. We saw Senator Murkomen very eloquently executing an argument about this and saying that the best thing is, why don't you hold your horses for another year as you consider what to do. So the other thing that this has done politically is to give us a sneak preview of what the negotiations around the content of the BBI reforms would take. It's not going to be an easy conversation. It's not going to be as predictable as the vote against Governor Waititu in the House, for example, where you saw the handshake team on one side. In this particular discussion around the formula, we saw a meeting point between the Raila-Ruto sides in favor or in defense of the coast, in defense of the northeastern, in defense of northern Kenya, and in the defense of South Rift as well. This again informs or basically illustrates the very well-proven informal shape of our politics. It's very, very dependent on the events of the moment. Because I think the movers, when the committee brought the motion on the formula, they expected this to be a quick, very, very quick process that by now would have actually reached the National Assembly now for further discussion. But look at how unpredictable that became, because political factors are like moving targets when it comes to our national politics. So it's very, very interesting to see not just how this one plays out, but how the rest of the conversation around BBI and the proposals to change the constitution will play out.
Interesting. But also, the political realities must also come to bear. Remember, the BBI discussion, we are told, is coming soon. That informs the reconstitution of House committees in the National Assembly and even in the Senate not so long ago, and even the leadership of the two chambers of Parliament. So eventually, this is a matter that will have to be dealt with, because it not only portends how the revenue will be shared by the 47 county governments, but also future political discussions. Remember, any mistake at this point will carry over for a number of years, as I stated earlier. But more importantly, the question of BBI that seems very close to the hearts of the president and the ODM leader. And so they wouldn't want to antagonize their support bases, or they wouldn't want to antagonize anyone as insofar as their search for support for the BBI process is concerned. And so it's basically walking on eggshells in terms of who gets what and whether that will be a satisfactory way of sharing the national cake, Joe.
Dr. Vincent Ongore, who's a keen viewer of Newsgang, says it is selfish to link revenue allocation to population size. The counties that have higher populations are obviously those that benefited inordinately from revenue allocations before. That is why those populations were attracted to those areas in the first place. To bring equity in the country, there needs to be a formula that uplifts the disadvantaged counties so they too can attract more people and more production. It's utterly unbelievable that a thinking, patriotic senator would even imagine that counties that are more developed should get more resources. To build a cohesive country, there needs to be equitable distribution of national revenue.
And I agree, Joe,
that debate should be put off until a more humane formula is negotiated.
And that was the spirit of the Constitution of Kenya 2010. It actually did acknowledge the difficult history parts of this country have had. If you look at Northeastern, for example, in 1926, the colonial authorities declared the Northern Frontier District a closed area, closed completely. And they said that it's not suitable for development. What did the British do? They made or just set up 2 military bases, one in Wajir and one in Mandera. Military bases, not hospitals, not roads. Remember, a place like Wajir is only starting to see tarmac roads after the Constitution of Kenya 2010.
They got their first one after devolution.
Absolutely, and after devolution. So this is really deep for some of the regions, because this is the first time they are feeling they can come to the center of they can come to the table as well. And a very important point has been raised there about the areas that have inordinately benefited since independence. You're talking of areas that have very, very good roads right now. So when you put and allocate, for example, more resources for development, what they'll do is to do dual carriage roads or maybe tarmac roads. There are regions in this country that have not seen any of that. And I think this is a whole question again of how we look at development. Do we still look at it the way the colonial authorities looked at it, where they said there are potential areas and there are non-potential areas? Just the other day, we discovered oil in Turkana. So to reach Turkana, do we still need to use Maram roads, even though there is oil up there? We never know what allocation of more resources to these counties will produce. It will expand the space for even the big communities, the large population that we are talking about, to do business in northern Kenya, to have very interesting, nice industries up in the north. Joe, you remember we went to Loyangalani, and how many days did it take on the road? I think 2 days to reach the place. Better roads in those places can only happen if revenue allocation thinks of areas like that in a fair way.
And I think that's a good way to end.